I brought these books from home. They're only a small portion of the books you've written. What was there in your life, especially your early life, that would give you the thoughts to fill so many books?
Hard work, training, and a good environment. I was very fortunate in having lived as a child and as a young boy in an environment where there were many people I could revere, people concerned with problems of inner life, of spirituality, of integrity, people who have shown great compassion and understanding for other people.
But your life itself has not been an easy life. You escaped from Poland just before the Nazis came in. What experiences of life have found their way into these books?
I would say, again, my background, my early upbringing. I would criticize my early upbringing as deficient in one respect and very rich in another respect. Deficient in what is maybe called the art of relaxation, sports. I'm not the sporting type, unfortunately, but very rich in moments of exaltation. This enabled me to stand a little bit above the circumstances of life and to take a perspective from which I could see the world, so to speak, from a higher point of view. In other words, I was trained as a child to live a life, or to strive to live a life which is compatible with the mystery and marvel of human existence.
And learning about it. What is the role of learning?
The role of learning was decisive. First of all, the supreme value ascribed to learning, and learning being a source of inspiration, learning being the greatest adventure, learning being a source of joy, and in fact, learning for the purpose of discovering of the importance of self-discipline. The realization, namely, that a life without discipline was not worth living.
Perhaps a life without surprise is not worth living either. You recently told an interviewer that what keeps me alive is my ability to be surprised. What has surprised you lately?
Everything. This may be my weakness. You know, you quoted once a statement from the book of Ecclesiastes, there is nothing new under the sun, and I disagree with that statement. I would say there's nothing stale under the sun, except human beings who become stale. I try not to be stale, and everything is new. No two moments are alike, and a person who thinks the two moments are alike has never lived. The secret of it is a very profound principle in philosophy, and that I would call the sense for the unique. Do you know that among 1 billion faces in this world, no two faces are alike? The other day, a person complained to me. He went to the Metropolitan Art Museum, and he was bewildered because no two paintings looked alike.
One of the most arresting titles of your many books would be this one, God in Search of Man. Is God in search of man?
That's a paradox. In fact, if God would consult me, I would tell him...
Does he?
He doesn't. He's too wise to consult me. I would say, why do you care about man? The biggest message of the Bible and of the prophets of Israel is that God takes men seriously. You remember he created Adam and Eve, and they immediately failed. He was disappointed, but he kept them alive. Then they gave birth to 2 boys, very nice boys. I'm sure they got some very excellent education in a private school, or in a public school, I'm not sure, but certainly in a good environment. They didn't live in the slums, you know. And you know what one brother did to the other? God should have been disgusted. He said, no, I will keep the human species alive. I'm waiting. Maybe someday there will be a righteous generation. And throughout history, as seen by the Bible, there's one disappointment for God after another, and he's still waiting for mankind which will live by justice and compassion. He's in search of men. Now let me say to you there are essentially 3 points. 1, God in search of men to me is a summary of all of the Hebrew Bible. 2, it expresses the idea of Judaism about the position of man in the universe. Man is terribly important. If God is so concerned about men, which surprises me again, why shouldn't God be concerned more about, let us say, cosmic energy or the astronaut techniques? He's interested about widows and orphans in Jerusalem. My Lord, if you were to ask me, I would say it's beneath your dignity. You, God of the universe, should be concerned about the poor, about the disadvantaged. Yes, he is. Man is very important to God.
And the third point?
The third point would be the nature of religion. The nature of religion is not just a longing and feeling of man searching for God. I think that God is more in search of men than man is in search of God. It gives us no rest. We have for generations, for decades, for centuries tried to refute the existence of God as if he didn't exist. And in spite of everything, man is still searching. Man is still waiting. Man is still longing. Man has discovered and is discovering that a man without God is like a torso, a body without a head.
But man is searching also because, if you'll forgive me, there's a certain absurdity, a certain purposelessness, or perhaps undiscoverable purpose. Let me cite an example. 10 days before Martin Luther King was killed, you, as a good friend of his, addressed a convention of the Rabbinical Assembly, and you said, Martin Luther King is a sign that God has not forsaken the United States of America. And that 10 days later, he was dead in the most cruel and purposeless fashion. It's that sort of question that challenges faith. How do you explain that?
If we understand the Bible properly, and very few people these days study the Bible properly, we atomize the Bible, we tear it to pieces. Instead of immersing in the thoughts of the Bible, you discover that God shares life with man, and he has given men freedom, a very questionable gift, and the most outstanding gift man has. Men can do anything. When the first son of the first couple decided to murder his brother, he did what he pleased, and God did not interfere.
But that raises the question, though. If you're saying that if God were to control every aspect of man's life, it would not be living, then that raises the question, why pray to God then? If God is not going to interfere, if God is not going to intervene, if God is not going to help, what is the role of prayer?
First of all, let us not misunderstand the nature of prayer, particularly in Jewish tradition. The primary purpose of prayer is not to make requests. The primary purpose of prayer is to praise, to sing, to chant. Because the essence of prayer is a song, and men cannot live without a song. Prayer may not save us, but prayer may make us worthy of being saved. Prayer is not requesting. There is a partnership of God and man. God needs our help. I would define man as a divine need. God is in need of man. In history, he cannot do the job alone because he gave us freedom. And the whole hope of messianic redemption depends on God and on man. We must help him. And by each deed we carry out, we either retard or accelerate the coming of redemption. Our role in history is tremendous. I mean, our human role. Absurdity, yes, plays a major role. In fact, it's the greatest challenge to existence, not only to religion, the greatest challenge to all activities. To political activity, to economic activity, to all idea of progress is the encounter with absurdity. And if I were to be asked, what is the meaning of God? A difficult question to answer in one sentence.
Well, I'll ask you, what is the meaning of God?
I would have to use a number of sentences. One, the certainty that there is a meaning beyond a mystery, that holiness conquers absurdity. And without holiness, we will sink in absurdity.
Where is holiness? Is it what's in the Bible? Is that where one finds holiness?
I don't believe in monopoly. I think God loves all men and has given many nations, has given all men an awareness of his greatness and of his love. And God is to be found in many hearts all over the world, not limited to one nation or to one people, to one religion. But I have to understand again, to come back to the problem of uniqueness. What has the Hebrew Bible given us in particular that's not to be found anywhere else? I would say that particular appreciation of the greatness of man, of man's tremendous potentiality as a partner of God. This idea, to me, is not to be found anywhere else.
But is that potential of being fulfilled? We talked a moment ago about Martin Luther King. You've been active in the civil rights movement since, I guess, the early 60s. You marched at Selma with Dr. King. I think it's fair to say, though, that you've written about the monstrosity of inequality. I think that's the expression you use. I think it's fair to say that in the past few years that the American community has hardened its attitude toward equality in jobs, housing, schools, and so on. How is that carrying out a potential?
You know, they have to tell you that life is a drama. They have to tell you that we are not in the midst of an automatic progressive development of humanity. There are ups and downs. At this very moment, there's a down. There's a depression. There is a renewal of prejudice, which is a poison. As a person committed to biblical faith, I would say what keeps humanity alive is the certainty that we have a Father. But then I also have to remember that God is either the Father of all men or of no men. And the idea of judging a person in terms of black or brown or white is an eye disease.
You've also said that you're an optimist against your better judgment.
Yeah.
But you're still an optimist.
I'm still an optimist.
You first gained prominence as a scholar writing about the prophets. Is it possible for a modern prophet to come to us? Or is that just pre-biblical?
Again, Mr. Stern, your questions are very rich and very complex and very meaningful. And since time is so limited and precious, I will have to give you short answers and only partial answers. The idea of a prophet is complex and consists above all of two things, of the message or the substance of what the prophet has to say, and of some extraordinary claim to an experience which is not given to other men. Let us ignore the second, let us take the first. What's so great about the message of the prophet? About the prophet as a character. I would say the prophet is a man who is able to hold God and man in one thought, at one time, at all times. This is so great and this is so marvelous, which means that whatever I do to man, I do to God. When I hurt a human being, I injure God. Now, their thoughts, their message continues to be so relevant today that I venture to say, and I had this experience with many distinguished philosophers when we got together to discuss social contemporary problems, that the ultimate source of hope for all of us, whether it was a Protestant or a Catholic or a secular philosopher, was suddenly our reliance on a hope uttered by the prophets of Israel. Therefore, I would say, the spirit of the prophet, the message of the prophet is very much alive. The kind of men who combined very deep love with very powerful dissent, painful rebuke with unwavering hope. The prophet as a witness to that great mystery, or to what I would call meaning beyond the mystery, namely God, could still be alive and should serve as an example.
Are you talking about a rebirth of their knowledge in the mouths of others, or is that not to be?
No, an identification. May I make a personal statement here? I've written a book on the prophets, a rather large book, spent many years. And then really this book changed my life. Because early in my life, my great love was learning, study. And the place where I preferred to live was my study in books and writing and thinking. I've learned from the prophets that I have to be involved in the affairs of men, in the affairs of suffering men. And I would like to say that one of the saddest things about contemporary life in America is that the prophets are unknown. There's a complete decline of the Bible in American education. No one knows the prophets. There are countless intellectuals who may be great authorities on literature. I've never read the prophets really, never been touched by them. And this, I'm sorry to say, is a little bit of a disaster. the great examples we need today are the ancient prophets of Israel. I say that this book on the prophets which I wrote changed my life. And I think that anybody who reads the prophets will discover, number one, that the prophets were the most disturbing people who've ever lived. Yeah? It's not easy to read.
You mean they were abrasive when you say disturbing?
Abrasive, disturbing, giving me a bad conscience.
Well, are you a prophet? You've been abrasive at times, particularly concerning the Vietnam War. You've said a great deal about that.
I wouldn't accept this praise, because it's enough for me to say that I am a descendant of the prophets, which is an old Jewish statement. It is a claim almost arrogant enough to say that I am a descendant of the prophets, what is called B'nai Nevi'im. So let us hope and pray that I'm worthy of being a descendant of the prophets.
You said during the height of the agitation over the Vietnam War that it was the great religious issue. What made the Vietnam War a religious issue?
Of course it's a religious issue. What does God demand of us primarily? Justice and compassion. What does he condemn above all? Murder. Killing innocent people. How can I pray when I have on my conscience the awareness that I am co-responsible for the death of innocent people in Vietnam? In a free society, some are guilty, all are responsible.
At this time, 1 year ago, I was covering a trial of priests and nuns, the Berrigan trial in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Prospective jurors, one after another, when being questioned by the judge and lawyers, said they thought it was wrong for clergymen to be involved in politics, that their job is to administer to spiritual needs. Why don't you stick to spiritual needs?
That's a very good statement. In fact, it's such a good statement that if the prophets were alive, they would be already sent to jail by these jurors, because the prophets mixed into social, political issues. And frankly, I would say that God seems to be an unreligious person, because if you read the words of God in the Bible, he always mixes in politics and in social issues.
That is the wonder of it, the torment that man has, the problem-solving machine that he is. That, you think, is, I detect, is the essence of living a human life.
Yes, you see, and that is true. No, but you see, one of the great sins of contemporary education is to give the impression you can solve all problems, or there are no problems. Actually, the greatness of man is that he faces problems. I would judge a person by how many deep problems he's concerned with.
But is not the quest of religion, though, to give one a sense of inner peace?
Now, you have to understand the meaning of inner peace. Let me give you first an example of a person who has no problems. Let me give you a dramatic, fictitious picture. Here stands a man, and I'll tell you this is a man who has no problems. Do you know why? He's an idiot. Because a man has problems. And the more complicated, the richer he is, the deeper are his problems. This is our distinction: to have problems, to face problems. Life is a challenge, not just a satisfaction. And the calamity of our time is to reduce life to pleasure only. I'm not against pleasure, but the greatness of life is experience and facing a challenge rather than just having satisfaction. I would be frightened if I were to be ruled by a person who is satisfied, who has the answers to everything. In a very deep sense, religion has two things. First of all, it's an answer to the ultimate problems of human existence. And it also has another side. It is a challenge to all answers. It is living in this polarity of these 2 points.
But there are so many religions that say, come to us and you will have no problem. We will solve your problems. Here's the word of God. He will solve your problem. You don't accept that.
No, I don't accept it, because it contradicts everything I have learned about life, from experience, from philosophy, from history, and from the Bible. If I look at the Bible, God is full of problems. Imagine, he created man. He created man on his own will, out of his own freedom. And man is a problem table. Look at the Bible. God is always wrestling with the problem of man. Even God has problems. This is a deep ingredient of existence, problems. And the tragedy of our education today is we are giving such easy solutions. Be complacent, have peace of mind, everything is fine. No, wrestling is the issue. Facing the challenge is the issue.
Would it be a better world if we were all of one religion?
No.
Would there be less strife?
No. As far as I can judge, and I try to judge God's will from history, it seems to be the will of God that there would be more than one religion. I think it's a very marvelous thing to realize. You know, if I were to ask the question whether, the example I think I gave you before, whether the Metropolitan Museum should try to introduce that all paintings should look alike, or I should like to suggest that all human faces should look alike, how would you respond to my proposal?
I would be against it.
I'm glad. We agree.
I think also, though, in your writings, you've indicated that even where one religion has been adopted in the state, there's no evidence that that has brought any happiness or any new high points of religious feeling. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I think it is the will of God that there should be religious pluralism. One of the most important things in life a human being faces is not only to know how to build a machine, but also how to overcome envy. It's an irrational, destructive power in every man. What does the school do about it? The secular school? Nothing. So I'm disappointed. American educational system, on all levels, has proved to be a terrible disappointment. Religious schools, it's a new problem. I only wish I could tell you the religious schools are doing a perfect job. I would say religious schools should deserve support because they are doing partly a good job. They at least teach people some of the great classical ideas of the religious tradition, and we cannot live without religious tradition. Because take away the religious tradition, what is left? You know what is left? Read contemporary literature and give the contemporary literature, the novels, as a source of inspiration for our young people. What will they get? The Psalms, no one reads. You're not allowed to read the Psalms in the school. How can you be human without being able to pray? We need religious education. The problem begins whether religious education is in such a splendid state. It isn't, but a separate problem. I think that aid to religious schools in some form that would not contradict the constitutional regulations would in the long run prove a blessing. The original fear of supporting religious schools was because religion was a tremendous power at that time, a power we were afraid of that would compete with the state, with the idea of equality. By now, religions are so weak in America, there's little to be afraid of religious power. Therefore, I would definitely say aid for religious schools in some form would be a great contribution.
You believe that organized religion is in a weakened condition?
I think so, but we have to put the blame not only on the religious people, on the religious establishment, but also on the people who belong to that establishment, on the members, on the plain people. You see, actually, the role of religion has declined as a result of countless assaults from all directions. So what is the outcome? In the past, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, a parent who had a gifted boy had a great dream. His son should be a rabbi, a minister, a priest. Today, a man who has a gifted boy, like him to be a doctor of medicine, a banker, a lawyer. So the gifted boys are being kept away by many people, blame the people. But the religious leaders are to blame. There is a decline in religious thinking, religious passion, a detachment from the real problems. Let me say to you the following. The central problem in the Bible is not God, but man. The Bible is a book about men, rather than man's book about God. And the great problem is how to answer, to respond to the human situation. And somehow, religious leaders have often become petrified in their own traditions and understanding and couldn't relate to the burning issues of the day.
How is it responding today?
How is it responding today? Not too well. A great many religious leaders have given up faith altogether. They are deluding themselves. As I told you before, self-deception is a major passion in human life. There are a great many people who use the word God and don't believe in it. Let me give you an example. One of the most popular definition of God, common in America today, was developed by a great Protestant theologian. God is the ground of being. So everybody's ready to accept it. Why not? Ground of being causes me no harm. Let there be a ground of being. Doesn't cause me any harm. I'm ready to accept it. It's meaningless. Isn't there a God who is above the ground? Maybe God is the source of qualms and of disturbing my conscience. Maybe God is a God of demand. Yeah, this is God, not the ground of being. Well, the result is we have religious institutions without a religious belief. We have a wave of non-belief. I have suddenly discovered that William James was not right when he spoke about, he was right, by the way. I'm saying it rhetorically. There is a will to believe, but there's today a will to disbelieve. And that will is very powerful. To this very day, our young people are craving for some deeper meaning. Our young people are craving for a religious outlook, and what they get is stone and not bread.
Well, what you've said, though, is that there's something more than relevance needed. That's an overused expression. You use the term in your writings, validity. Religion must have validity. What makes a religion valid?
No, if it is true, if it is it corresponds to real urgencies and questions and problems. Let me give you an example of what I mentioned to you before. Our entire civilization today revolves around one idea, interest or need. And we are taught the greatest thing in life is to satisfy one's needs and interests. Actually, our way of living revolves around one principle, self-interest, self-interest. There's nothing else but self-interest. This is a fallacy, according to religion, and religion is right, valid. Because if everything is self-interest, then there is no love. Can you imagine humanity without love? If love is only self-interest, then love is a fake, pretense.
You're telling me of the nature of man, not the nature of God, aren't you?
Yes, the nature of God is that man should have ends, not only needs. The difference between an animal and a man is not the needs. Animal has needs, man has needs too. But man, in addition to needs, has to have ends, goals to strive for. The great task of religion is to teach men how to convert ends into needs. But what we do instead is to convert needs into ends. And needs are unreliable as a standard because some needs are authentic, some needs are false. Look at advertisement. Advertisement is trying to evoke in us needs which we are not in need of. Can you imagine a day will come when I will feel all of a sudden I couldn't live without color television. Television is not enough, has to be a color television. I will give away the last penny I have because advertisement has convinced me that without color television, I couldn't survive, right? And a million other things. I have to have at least a summer home and a winter home because without a winter home and a summer home, I'm not a respectable citizen. I read it in an advertisement. So it becomes a need. Religion says no. Man's distinction is to live by ends and for ends and goals, and not only satisfy needs. I am not against satisfaction of needs. That's a necessary function of man. We have to satisfy our authentic needs. It's very important. We are against asceticism. We love life, but there are also ends and goals to be served. And this is the difference between animal and man. But ask an average man, what are your goals in life? He'll tell you, life insurance, a Cadillac, and color television.
You wrote a volume entitled Who is Man? You dealt with some of these questions. Is there anything else you want to add to your definition?
Oh, out of pain and anguish I wrote that book. because I consider men to be left without friends in the world. Wherever I look, books I read, it's full of contempt for the nature of man, the naked ape. Man is all violent. Man is essentially an animal. America spends hundreds of millions of dollars to study the behavior of animals in order to understand man, because essentially man is an animal. And I'm asking you, what a bigger insult is it to man to say that man is essentially a beast, except he has the ability to make tools, so to speak? My definition of an ape is a human being without the ability to speak. Just as valid as to say that man is an animal with the ability to speak. No, what I try to do in this book is to to fight the ongoing dehumanization of man, which I see in every step everywhere. Unless I feel that my life is accountable to him who is much greater than I am, I could not always control my mean leanings. I would not only be ready for self-sacrifice, number one. Number two, my life would be poor. The deepest passion in any real human person is a craving for meaning of existence. What kind of meaning of existence can I find in the fact that I can make a few dollars? That I have a little success? Here I am, and tomorrow I'm gone. What's the meaning of everything? What's the meaning of our society? What's the meaning of our world? God is the meaning beyond absurdity. Wherever I go, I encounter absurdity.
Consistent with the Jewish faith, you never write much, in fact, I don't recall you writing at all about a life hereafter. Lots of religions are predicated on the idea of salvation rather than this earthly existence. You don't talk about that sort of thing. Why is that?
Actually, I did write an essay on this problem, which I read at an international conference on death, etc., in Florence about 3 years ago. But frankly, I'll give you the real answer. We believe in an afterlife, but we have no information about it.
And therefore you can't write about it?
I can write about it in terms of belief.
Or expectation? Or hope?
I did.
Or...
I did.
But you think that's less important than life on Earth?
I think that's God's business, what to do with me after life. Here, it's my business what to do with my life. So I leave it to him. I am so busy trying to live a good life and don't always succeed. I have no time to worry what God is going to do with me once I'm in the grave. Who knows what he wants to expect me to be doing in the grave?
And through all of this, I find its uniqueness in your feelings of a collaborative effort between God and man.
Yes.
It's a sharing.
Yes.
It's a powerful concept. I'm not sure I know how we can help God.
You see, there is an old idea in Judaism found in the Bible, strongly developed by the rabbis, and very little known. And that is that God suffers when man suffers. There's a very famous text that says, even when a criminal is hanged, the gallows, God cries. He says, woe unto me. He's very unhappy when man is unhappy. There is this great sympathy of God and part of man. God identifies himself with the misery of man. I can help him by reducing human suffering, human anguish, and human misery.
We have just about a minute or so left. I should say at the start of this hour, before we began this hour, Dr. Heschel indicated an interest in directing a message at young people, and I don't know that I ever in the past hour gave you the chance I promised you that I would give you.
I would say to young people a number of things, and I have only 1 minute. I would say let them remember that there is a meaning beyond absurdity. Let them be sure that every little deed counts, that every word has power, and that we can do everyone our share to redeem the world, in spite of all absurdities and all the frustration, all disappointments. And above all, remember that the meaning of life is to build life as if it were a work of art. You're not a machine. When you are young, start working on this great work of art called your own existence. And the best way, and one of the ways of doing it, or two ways of doing it, is one, remember the importance of self-discipline. Second, study the great sources of wisdom. Don't read the bestsellers. And third, remember that life is a celebration, or can be a celebration. There's much of entertainment in our life. And entertainment is destroying much of our initiative. It weakens our imagination. What's really important is life as celebration. In a very deep sense, I would say that the addiction, the drug addiction, which so many people suffer, is due to the fact that man cannot live such a shallow life, stale. He needs exaltation. He needs moments of celebration. One of the most important things is to teach men how to celebrate life.
You talked earlier of slanders. May I give you an example of something which is not a slander? Perhaps the most astute comment on your work was made by Professor Marty of the University of Chicago, and he said Rabbi Heschel's work, unlike other philosophers, is directed not only at the mind, but at the heart and the will. I couldn't have said it so perceptively. Thank you very much for being with us.
The Eternal Light, the NBC television religious program, has presented a conversation with the late Dr. Abraham Joshua Heschel. Taped shortly before his death, this program is dedicated to his memory. Dr. Heschel was professor of Jewish ethics and mysticism at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, and a distinguished author, lecturer, philosopher, and activist. Dr. Heschel's humanity and love of life is his legacy to us and can serve as an inspiration for all of us to follow. Dr. Heschel spoke with Carl Stern, NBC News United States Supreme Court correspondent. This special Eternal Light program was brought to you in association with the Jewish Theological Seminary of America and was a recorded production of the NBC Religious Programs Unit. Your announcer, Gene Hamilton.